Hello and welcome to Confessions of a Successful Leader, hosted by me, Andrew Tallents, the self-coaching expert. In each episode of the show, we hear the insightful confessions of a successful leader who wants to inspire others to live their professional and personal dreams. I am always keen to hear your feedback, particularly in relation to the kinds of leaders you would like me to invite onto the show in future. But for now, sit back, relax, and enjoy the rich insights from our special guest. Hello and welcome to another episode of Confessions of a Successful Leader, hosted by me, Andrew Tallents, the self-coaching expert. In each episode of the show, we hear the insightful confessions of a successful leader who wants to inspire others to live their professional and personal dreams. This week, I'm delighted that Simon Hewitt has joined us in the studio. Simon is the co-founder and client partner of Orange Panther Collective, an integrated creative communications agency that helps scale-ups make the leap into the mainstream and helps more established shake-ups, businesses that are drifting out of the mainstream, stay relevant. He has over 20 years experience working on some of the biggest brands in the UK and the world across various sectors and platforms. At Orange Panther Collective, Simon and his team leverage their expertise in advertising, marketing, brand building, and communications to deliver high-quality work without the high costs, thanks to their collective model. They are passionate about sharing their knowledge and insights with the next breed of brands that want to reach and engage mass-market audiences. Simon's previous roles include client managing director at Engine, where he ran the Red Bull and Olympic content businesses, and senior positions at Leo Burnett, BBC Creative, AMV BBDO, and M&C Saatchi. He's a dad of two, loving husband, Chester FC co-owner, and Liverpool fan. Simon, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much for having me.
I'm sure we'll get to it later, but when Liverpool are playing Chester at some point in the future, it'll be interesting to know where your allegiance is. So tell us a little bit about yourself, your current focus, just so the audience can get to know you a little bit.
Sure. And just quickly on the football note, exactly, there'll be the day when pigs probably fly, because anyone who knows the football will know that Chester and Liverpool are at opposite ends of the pyramid. So thank you for introducing me and kind of what I'm up to, and running with a couple of very smart and very good human beings who helped me run OPC. But client partner Orange Panther Collective. Spend most of my time currently trying to get a balance between, talked about the fact we work with shake-ups and scale-ups, which are two very different types of business. So scale-ups being very new, young businesses, shake-ups being very more often old, established businesses who've lost their way. So we spend a lot of time just talking to very different types of people about the same challenge they have in terms of trying to help them grow from through smart advertising and marketing. And the last year, everybody knows it's been a very difficult, complicated 12, 18 months economic perspective. And so it's been hard for us as a business. It's hard out there on the whole. So I spend most of my time just sort of trying to keep us steady and help us, find more opportunity, I guess, to grow into and to kind of, shape our business. So, many a night spent, probably not enough sleep, too much head scratching, thinking about where we're going as a business and how we get there.
Excellent. And so the audience get to know a little bit about you on the non-work side as well. Just share with us a few things that when you're not obviously laying awake worrying about these things, what do you do to try and switch off?
Sure. So, I mentioned football, which a bit of, mostly good news at the minute for me, being a Liverpool fan, so that's kind of good. And Chester, not too bad either, although we got knocked out of the FA Cup week before last. But otherwise, I run around with a 13-year-old and a 6-year-old. The 13-year-old just turned 13 yesterday, and I'm somewhat terrified about having a teenager. But them's the breaks. And we're just finishing off a build in our house in Streatham, in southwest London. So we're spending a lot of time trying to I take no credit. My wife has done pretty much everything. She's been amazing. So I spend most of my time consoling her when things go wrong with the build. It's mostly been my role. And we've currently got a plumber downstairs looking at the fact that our boiler's not working. So, all good fun.
Excellent, thanks. And we'll come back to that a little bit later. But what the audience wants to know as well is, obviously you're a successful leader, but it's about what experiences have shaped that. And it'd be interesting to know from your earlier years, whether that's childhood or later, what experiences really shaped your leadership style in those early years of you taking a leadership role.
Yeah, I think, obviously when we talked about doing this, I sort of reflected on things a little bit. And I don't know, there's probably two things that kind of come to mind in terms of, two things happened in my younger years that informed how I act now. And therefore that translates into sort of leadership, because that's the position I'm in now as a co-founder. And I think they are, one of them is I spent a lot of time abroad as a kid, a lot of time traveling around the world. Very lucky. My dad was sort of sent out to Malaysia when I was about 7. And I spent about 10, 12 years living in kind of Malaysia, Hong Kong. And we just traveled a lot. And I think it taught me as a kid to sort of be very open-minded from a cultural perspective. And that's like, isn't that a wonderful thing to say? Because you're super, but genuinely it is. It's kind of like I'm more at home stepping off into 35-degree heat, 100% humidity in Kuala Lumpur than I necessarily am walking outside into Streatham. But it just means sort of you have a different sort of a center of gravity, or a slightly broader center of gravity, or maybe it's a North Star, whatever it is. But that's sort of general, I kind of feel like I'm just more diverse in my perception of human beings, full stop, having spent so much time at a very informative age in lots of different parts of the world, and some, again, a lot poorer parts of the world versus necessarily UK. And so I sort of think that has, I don't know, I think I saw a lot that informed me and made me think maybe more neutrally on the whole, just in general. And so I kind of, I don't know, I think that's something. But also, I was then shipped off to boarding school with my parents still living in Malaysia. And so I think the other half of what I learned as a kid that's informed how I think and act now is, that's kind of tough. I think, a 9-year-old in boarding school in the UK with parents who are 8,000 miles away. And so you're kind of on your own, you're properly on your own. And so that's, it makes you tough. It kind of hardens you up, and that's great. But also means when things aren't going brilliantly, being bullied at school and stuff, which was very commonplace then, and it's still commonplace now, sadly. But I think you have to deal with it very much on your own, and also as a time when bullying wasn't reflected upon by teachers in the same way it is now. I think it was a bit more like just suck it up and get on with it. So that's kind of tough, and I think with your parents not there to help with that, and you just generally have this sort of sense of deep compassion for anybody in that situation. So I sort of think that compassionate perspective has carried through to how I work with people now. I'm always like shoes on the other foot, having been through difficult times and a long, long time ago. And, I don't even know if it consciously impacts how I act now, but I think subconsciously, definitely. It just means I look out for people. If there's a quiet person in the room, I'm always like, how are they? What's going on with them? Because I was maybe once upon a time, I was that person. So those two things, I think, having a bit of a broader sense of culture and people, and then also having a sort of an empathy for people on the wrong end of, a difficult time.
Thank you. And it's very normal and common actually for a lot of leaders, entrepreneurs, founders, to have the kind of story that you're talking about. There's something that really gave them a self-belief from their family system earlier in their life. And then there was something that also happened which drove them to be resourceful and not necessarily need lots of help from people, and therefore succeed, in short term and medium term. But also there's the negative side of that. And I'm sure, you've thought about this as well. There are some aspects of our earlier lives that may be impacted negatively in the way that we're leading. And sometimes that's about relationships. Sometimes it's about not necessarily, noticing things that are going on around us, and it happens unconsciously. So when did you first notice that maybe some of your past was impacting your leadership from a negative perspective?
I think the sort of the immediate flip side to that coin of being kind of compassionate and looking out for people is, I think I was probably for a long period too much of a yes man, too much of a wanting to please people, wanting to make sure people were happy and content. So maybe not just pleasing people. I didn't want a pat on the back or anything like that. I mean, I can't take any praise. I sort of cringe and shrink like, which maybe is something in and of itself. But yeah, I think sort of I spent a lot of time just wanting to make sure everyone in the room is happy, and that's often clients. And so you do everything you could, and then you'd end up and I still get this now. I'm still probably, one thing we do as a business is probably overburn on resource for some of our clients. And, I work with an amazing strategist, an amazing creative partner, and I think they're both much more, fair is fair. You get paid what you get paid to do what you do, and, you should be fine. I mean, let's all give a little bit more. We want to build long-term relationships, and there's a massive, incremental growth opportunities with being just nice, good human beings who people want to work with. So that's all fine. But then there's a point where you've got to go, right, hold on, don't start giving stuff away for free. Don't, be careful. And I sort of think there's a bit of a need to make everyone happy. And so, and I lose sight of the kind of commercial ramifications of that. So I think that's probably one thing. I think also I'm probably spend still too much time in my head trying to read the room, or maybe it's not even read the room, check I'm okay, maybe having an eye on me, and kind of, because some of the fallout, I suppose, of some of the stuff I've said is that, yes, it makes you very independent and you get on with stuff, but it also means you didn't always get that supportive, you're doing a good job, you're all right. And even though I don't like anyone telling me that, I kind of I'm constantly checking myself. Are you all right? Is everything okay? Is everything okay? And in that, you sometimes, ironically, how much I think my EQ radar is gold, I'm actually ignoring people trying to check I'm okay. And that can get a little bit out of whack sometimes about where my focus is, I think. So again, I'd probably, without trying to find everything in pairs, but that's probably the two things where that my past has negatively impacted it. So too much like in my own head, and then almost also too eager to please, even if it's commercially damaging to the business.
And again, it's very normal for lots of entrepreneurs to have this kind of dynamic going on, and some of the unconscious, subconscious coming through. And what you're talking about is how you become aware of that, because once you're aware of it, you can do something about it. And if we're not aware of it, then we can't. And many leaders don't become aware of it because they don't reflect enough. So bear in mind, that's what you've told us, and thank you for that. How have you adapted your leadership style over time to reconcile that some of those things are helping you and some of them don't always help you? How have you adapted to that?
I think from a perspective, from a sort of so the commercial, the wanting to please everybody and kind of the commercial side of things, I think actually probably I was way more guilty of it before starting OPC, or Orange Panther Collective, but we abbreviate because it's much easier. Because, I worked at big agencies on big bits of business, on big retainers. And so it was quite easy to just, your job was keep them coming back for more and keep everybody happy. So it's easy to probably over service stuff. But then, just before I left, actually, Engine, my last place, we were having a big review of one of our clients because we were just all overburning it massively. We were all putting too much into it, and it's a systematic issue with them, I think. But it made us all sort of reflect on the fact that we weren't helping it. So when it came to set up OPC, I was thinking I've got to try and find that harder edge to some of these conversations and be, we want to have a successful business. You've got to balance that fair, generous spirited sort of, and also, that kind of side of it with being, really, this is what we're worth, know your worth, know your value, and don't be ashamed to ask people to sort of pay for it. And I think there is a thing, if you give too much of it away, you actually diminish your worth. You need to know that you're worth this. People should pay money for this, and you should value that. And actually, I think ultimately, for me, integrity is the most valuable thing in any business. And I think to have integrity and to have this sort of people to reflect upon you as someone with integrity, the best way of doing that is to have both sides of that, to be good, kind, generous human being, but to also know your value, know that people should pay for it, know that you don't give stuff away for free, so you don't devalue yourself. Otherwise, it can just be it's a bit messy, and that diminishes, I think, integrity. So I think probably very aware of that. And then in terms of the other side of it with the self-reflection, I mean, I reflect so much on myself and then the potential for not paying enough attention to other people that all I ever do is reflect on that. But then I'm still not sure if I'll ever get that quite right but I think normally, I don't know, feedback on me generally tends to be that I'm very compassionate and listen to what people have going on in their lives and try and accommodate accordingly. So I think I'm probably not doing a terrible job of that second part.
Sure, and that leads us on to sustaining this approach. What I find is a very interesting book called Positive Intelligence by Shirzad Chamine, which I reference quite a bit. And in that book, he talks a lot about saboteurs, which is another way of saying the negative voices in our head, whether that's talk about the chimp on our shoulder or whatever it is, and keeping those at bay, because then they tend to make us a bit more judgmental when they're in our mind rather than discerning. So how do you make sure you keep your saboteurs at bay and try and maintain either a neutral or positive outlook in when you're leading the business?
Well, yeah, we did actually, when we started, we did a lot of myself and business partners. So Lorna, her mum, is a career coach, and we did a lot of work around saboteurs and understand. I've done a lot of mindfulness beforehand as well, and I'm very I do a lot of I have therapy every week, like for an hour every week. I do a lot of introspection and review of talking and thinking about what's going on. And I think the saboteurs, I think with saboteurs, it's the most important thing is to know that you have them. Everybody has them, and to understand what they are, even if you can't. Sometimes I think it's quite hard that they're not the most tangible. They sort of, over time, you can really isolate them and analyze them, but they can often feel quite intangible. But I think there's a general understanding that, you have saboteurs, you have triggers, negative and positive, but often negatives stand out more. And I think people tend to react more intensely from a negative experience than a positive one, sadly, because the fear, the fight or flight reaction and kind of like our ingrained, inbuilt hyper reaction or enlarged reaction to negatives versus positives is sort of there. So I think it's sort of, understanding that, knowing you have saboteurs, knowing you have things that kind of sidetrack you, knock you off your kind of like daily course, knowing that they exist, trying to ascertain roughly what they are. And then, some of it's like, it's funny, I think sometimes with saboteurs, some of it is letting it be, kind of like one of the best ways of dealing, I think, with some of your problems, saboteurs, challenges, is finding a way of just letting, like mindfulness teaches you, be in the moment, be there, let things happen, focus on the now, because so many of those saboteurs are the things you bring into your head and you worry about and you foresee all these challenges and you get tripped up by thinking about it. So I think there's quite a lot of it just letting it be, letting it flow. Also, perfectionism is, it's a dangerous trait, because if you are anywhere near a perfectionist, and I think a lot of, I think you can probably tell me, but I think a lot of entrepreneurs are perfectionists, and I think they often are caught up by the fact they're so terrified of doing things wrong or badly. And actually, there's so much opportunity that comes from doing things wrong and badly. So it's sort of like, don't get caught up in all of that, but just acknowledge that your imperfections. Try not to stress about them. Try not to have them derail you too much. And I try and remember that. And I every day fail most of the time at it, just because, they still creep in. But I think as long as you can spot them, then whilst they might creep in, you can sort of just take a moment to, even simple things like breathing techniques, right? I don't know, a few little breathing techniques I've been taught are just really good at just slowing it all down and just stopping the noise, because otherwise, if you let this thing go, it runs around like a freaking lunatic with a klaxon all the time. So I'm not sure if I answered your question. That's just some thinking.
Yeah, and it's good to know that you've studied that material and utilised in that way. I think a lot of people do, but they don't necessarily use it. So I was very interested in what you said there as well, because a lot of leaders will be able to relate to this. We recognise what's maybe not helping us, saboteurs, whatever that might be. We become aware of it. We then try and do something and see the gift in some of those things or accept them. But sometimes we don't ask for support or help in doing that, because you said it's usually triggers. So what we can do in certain key relationships with stakeholders is recontract around these saboteurs, and when they're appearing, to actually get some support and advice from those people around us. For you, it's therapy and some other things. So what was the point for you that you realised that you did need help and you couldn't do that on your own necessarily?
I think so. I've had therapy for, on and off, for 10, 12 years. I sort of think just talking therapy is brilliant for just letting stuff out, because it's like just opening a valve on the side of your head and the steam all comes out and you can just get stuff out. And also you can see patterns forming, and it takes often time to see those patterns, really, because they seem like it's just a volley of thoughts and frustrations and triggers. And then over time, you see the patterns quite, and you always seem to come back to the same kind of things. And I got, a triumvirate, the three key things that always, where my saboteurs lie, and they are work, they are home, and they are head. And they are inevitably, those are probably the most common three categories. But, just understanding kind of which ones sit within which, and the commonality between some of your saboteurs across all three. So I sort of feel like, having therapy has taught me that. But to your question about when did I first sort of realize, I don't know. I was probably, I don't know, again, to a lot of other people who've been on your podcast, but I started suffering from anxiety in my late teens, sort of 18, 19, and went to see a psychotherapist. It's one of those ones where I think he might have glandular fever, my son, because he's very tired all the time and it actually was like I was suffering with anxiety, and that kind of led to depression. So I was always very aware of it. And, and I then got a job in London. I was from the Northwest originally, and I came down and I got a job in London when I was like 21, 22. And, I'd already been feeling quite anxious for sort of 3 or 4 years. And so I'd already, but I don't know, I kind of just felt like, I'm going to sort it out myself. I'm going to be fine. And I just fought it. I was constantly pushing against it, to all my things I said before about letting it wash over you. And I remember one of the most important bits of information I was given was that sort of, be on the top of the water, let the wave, take you, just go with it, and not so much like let it smash on your head, but, just like let it kind of roll through, and just with passive becomes you can become much more active. Find the moments when you are calm to be more active. The rest of the time, try and be passive and let it just kind of wash past you, because if you fight it and you grit your teeth and you do it, it ends up being so much harder. But of course I did for all of my 20s and half my 30s. I just thought, no, we're going to be fine. And then I just got to a point where I thought, and I generally up and down, I wasn't always feeling bad at all, but I just got to a point where I felt I just suddenly matured and went, hold on, there's got to be another smarter way. Isn't there a sort of way? And talking therapy. And also suddenly mental health was becoming a topic that you didn't have to be ashamed of, because for a long time you did. And so right at that point, probably in about 2010, I went to see a therapist, and I sort of never looked back and kind of loved it. But now as a business, from a senior management perspective, I talk very openly about it. We'll always talk openly about it. My partner sees therapists every week, one of them. My other partner doesn't at all, but he doesn't need to. That's cool. Horses for courses. So I sort of feel like it was always going to happen. Got to a point where I just naturally sort of matured and didn't feel afraid of it. And now I'm kind of like, as I say, I think it's the best thing in the world. And I think it's very good for me. You can also talk about business. You can talk about your leadership skills, and you can talk about your personal issues, and you can talk about stuff in your head. All those three things I talked about, you can talk about all of that and unravel things and try and improve yourself constantly. And it's not because for other people's benefit, you're doing it for yours. You just want to be clearer of mind and clearer of perspective. And that's what talking therapy does, is it lets the steam out so you can just be clearer and let your gut maybe lead more rather than overthinking stuff.
I love the metaphors you're using as well. And I just wanted to explore a little bit more. You've talked a lot about mindfulness, and obviously therapy helping with that sort of steam come out as well. What I've noticed in leaders being great leaders, and it's such a simple thing but very difficult to achieve, is that the ability they're so good at what they do is they're present quite a lot of the time. So it's taking your mindfulness concept where we are present and letting things wash over us, but actually in relationship, in those kind of key moments where actually we are triggered. So what have you found easiest in terms of being present in your relationships, and what's been the most challenging in terms of your presence in relationships?
Well, I'd probably say my weakest, I don't know. So just to add to the potential cliches of entrepreneurial leadership and so on. But so one of the things which my psychotherapist said, she's like, I think you should, maybe go and get tested for ADHD, because you're pretty much everything that we talk about, there's a lot of things on a list here which tick, 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 tick. And it'd just be interesting, not expecting it to fix anything, but just be interesting to have another perspective and see whether there is something there which might explain and some of your patterns. And then you can do, what do they call it? Basically, kind of like how you take psychotherapy and put it into the workplace, so you can teach yourself habits to be more effective in the workplace. Because definitely presence of mind, I'm either very focused on something and so into it and deeply committed and compassionate, and probably, almost like I'll ask 5 times, are you okay? Rather than like, maybe you should only ask once or twice, because that sense of like, I really just want to know this person's okay. But then I can also, like I said, either be in my own world or frankly, just got a bit of a squirrel brain. I can just be distracted by something very quickly and then I'm not present. So, and then because I'm very self-aware, if I'm ever not present, I get an enormous amount of self-loathing. So like, fuck, I wasn't there. I should have just, I didn't treat that right. They must think I'm a horrible person. I should have done. So there's sort of still a tug of war there. And I think, again, it's textbook, and I may be nothing to do with ADHD, but of being hyper-focused and really in the moment versus being unable to get into the moment. And then, having that sort of self-loathing of, oh God, I wasn't there for somebody or something. So it's complicated in that respect, but my intention is always good. And I think I'm always very quick to ask if I haven't been there for someone, I haven't been on point, how I can be, and then making sure if I cock it up once, I kind of try not to cock it up the second time. So we definitely take a moment where I'm super focused to make sure that, listening to the needs of others. Just making sure that, doing right by people and giving them a voice and so on.
Yeah, and I think I relate to that. Professionally, I am much more present. It's what I do for a living, but personally, it's almost that, I probably don't need to do it as much at home. I should be. And it's the usual listening to my wife at night, and really I'm half listening, and she knows I'm only half listening. So I don't get away with it, even though I can excuse it around my professional life and that. So yeah, I get that completely. It's very difficult to do all the time, but as you say, where we can do it, it really makes a difference, and people really feel it as well, don't they?
Yeah, and but actually interesting. Sorry, your point about personal and professional. Sorry, saying my point about personal and professional. I answered solely on professional, and this is not all about professional. I know, and I think on the personal level, I think it's interesting. We allow ourselves sometimes to be not as good at it as at home, because that's a funny thing. I also have is like absolutely at work, you've got to be the best version of yourself. At home, you don't have to be, and that's sort of true, but also sort of not like fair on people, around you, your partners. It's kind of like, don't save up all your brilliance or whatever for here and then expect just like drop it all here. I think there is definitely more of a balanced focus I could bring. And I think hopefully the more senior you get and the more successful you get, I have no idea this is true, but you can just take the pressure off yourself a little bit and actually be more a slightly better version of you at home, because otherwise you do it all at work, you've run out of energy by the time you get home. So there's sort of probably more of a balance that could be implemented there. But
no, and going back to your earlier comments as well about your passion. So what I tend to find on the sports field is, doesn't matter what the sport is, but again, a great example there of where athletes who are really at the top of their game, they're present, all the way through the actual competition that they're in, and a lot to teach us there in terms of that focus and presence. So I'm sure Chester City, takes some lessons from you there as well, Simon. So. Yeah, good. We've obviously got the audience out there listening and watching this, and there's going to be many out there that can relate to your story and the vulnerability that you're showing today, which I really appreciate. But if you were to summarize the advice that you would offer to leaders out there who can relate to your story and maybe think about how can I channel those early experiences, which sometimes I felt quite difficult to manage and deal with, how can they channel it into more sustainable leadership over time? What advice would you give?
I mean, I think a few things, I guess. One of them definitely is, we talked about, about the saboteurs and about listening to awareness, I guess. Awareness of self and awareness of our flaws is like so important. But some people will be either bad at that and say, that's great advice, thanks, or are too good at that, but they're so aware of their flaws. So there's this kind of like imposter syndrome, which I know I definitely get. And, various other challenges that kind of come with being sort of almost too aware of failings. And I think that, there's a funny thing about, you talk about football or sport. I remember when I played football, it's the best time in the middle of a football match because you're not thinking about anything other than football. You're there in the moment, and you can't, and then you do it enough over time that you trust yourself. You know what you're good at and what you're not good at, but you really kind of know what you're good at and not good at. And, you'll probably always try and make up for the not good at, but you'll embrace the stuff you're good at. Right, and you'll feel good about it afterwards. You'll just have this lovely sense of, I smashed it, that sort of. I really enjoyed that, and it's only football, so it's not. But actually, I think pulling that forward to real life is really important. Those moments where you sort of, without even thinking about it, you just do, say, act, deliver something really well, and like hold on to those moments, remind yourself that you did those things, and build a sort of a bucket load of those moments, so that you're right. Okay, I can do that. That bit I'm good at, and not arrogance at all. I don't think I could ever hope. I can't stand arrogance, but it's just confidence and ability to go, yeah, I've got that. I'm good at that bit. And that might, as I say, take 1,000 examples of being good at it for you to actually believe it. But every single one, remember you did it, believe it a little. And then after time, you'll have this lovely sense of, I'm good at that stuff. So that's the good stuff. And I can embrace that. And on the bad stuff, or the place where I have my saboteurs, it's sort of being aware of those things, acknowledging they're there, and, trying to get better at certain things, but not beating yourself up too much about it. So that, throughout all of it, you come out with this slightly more kind of like this sort of sense of, my lows or my weaknesses are not as heavy and bad as I thought. And actually, even if I'm not great stuff, I'm going to be all right with it. It is what it is. I'm going to be all right. As long as I'm not a terrible human being, I'm going to be all right with it. And those, highs, they don't have to be massive. You don't constantly look for these amazing once in a lifetime highs. There's just lots of things you do really well. And you build these two nice bits of you end up sort of bringing everything kind of here, maybe not, probably not level, but there's actually quite a lot of stuff you realize you're good at, and they can be small things, but they're good. And you've got this nice, good stuff, and the bad stuff is not as bad as all that. And you have this general sort of sense of calm and confidence that enables you just to be more relaxed in what you do, calmer about your approach to stuff. And that, I think, is definitely, to your thing about presence, that is one of the best things you can be as a leader. It's calm, considered, present, and impactful. You bring something to the party because of those things. Even if you think you bring nothing. I'm the T-shaped person in our business. I've got a creative brain. I've got two strategic brains, and then I'm the person who does some stuff. And I used to joke I was a plate spinner, or they're very good at stapling. But I know I bring stuff to the party because I'm sort of the rainmaker. I'm sort of the one in the middle that kind of brings the business in, but also keeps everything going. I lead kind of every meeting, when we're doing internal reviews. And without that, I'm sort of the glue. And I see that now more than ever. And even just being the glue between some other people to make them really good at what they do, there's real power in that. And that's one of my good things. I'm good at that. And I never would have thought I'd have celebrated being a bit of glue. But I'm now like, yeah, I'm good at gluing stuff. I'm good at seeing the dots and joining them. And I'm good at putting those two things together. And that's right. I don't have to come up with the most intense strategy in the world. I don't have to come up with the most mind-blowing creative idea in the world. I'm just, if I hadn't been involved, those two things wouldn't have been as brilliant. And I'm happy at just putting them together. So I sort of think within all of that, there is that calm, confident, perspective on life that is really important to bring to the party. And the last thing, I was reading this thing about, was it perception versus perspective, and how, everyone talks about, it's all about perception is so important to kind of, it's, and what's but actually I think, this whole point of this thing I was reading was about, actually having it's not about your perception. It's about having a broader perspective on what's going on. And it's about, within that perspective, understanding the other person's perspective and basically seeing the whole picture, the complete kind of view of things, rather than it's your perception of that moment and forcing that upon people. And I think that I remember taking so much of that. I think my power is in, I have perspective and I can look at it all and put things together. I don't have an individual perception that I then have to force upon people. And maybe the force bit's unnecessary, but you kind of get my point. And so I think within all of that jumble of thoughts there is just a lovely way of not being terrified of the things you're bad at, embracing the stuff you're good at, however small, and bringing a lovely, broader perspective and calm, considered attitude to work. And I think that is enormously valuable. And a lot of people, I would like to think would want to do that. And so if that's the way your brain works, embrace it and bring it to work every day.
What I love about what you said there is we all have this inner voice, and what I'm hearing from you is sometimes just tweak that inner voice from being one which is coming from a negative, critical place of must do better. That comes a lot from a lot of our childhoods, to that almost kindness of, as you were saying, well, actually, you're really good at that, or actually, maybe you're not so good at that. You could improve it a little bit, but it's the intention of where it's coming from and the tone of voice, isn't it, really, which I love in terms of what you were talking about. So thank you for that. I always love to end in terms of a question about the future, because you've talked about the past and the present focus. So just tell us a little bit about what's going on for you for the next 3-5 years. What are you going to be in service of in the future? How can people collaborate with you, and how can they get hold of you if they want to talk to you?
Well, I mean, I suppose as well as bringing balance from work into my home, as I can hear my kids have come back from school, I said, which is a really very important thing for me and for anybody in a sort of family situation. But I think from a professional perspective, we want to grow Orange Panther Collective. We are 3.5 years old. It's been a very difficult time, but the positive things seem to be happening. A bit more confidence in terms of the marketplace. So I want to grow the business. I want to make some wonderful, amazing work that I feel deeply proud of, and that we as a team feel deeply proud of, and informs our brand's growth. I want, we're all about effectiveness. Can't just look pretty and sound great to your mates. It's got to be really effective work. So I think the next, 3 to 5 years are all about growing OPC, putting all our effort into growth. Want to focus any revenue we get kind of into growth. And I think for me, I want to, I still feel like I'm learning an enormous amount. I'd love to think I'd be able to give wise pearls of wisdom to people, much wiser than they currently are in sort of 5 years' time. And I'd love to do some mentoring, actually. I would really like to. I'd enjoy being a mentor, but I think at the minute we're so busy in the day-to-day, it's hard to do that. But I think, in terms of like working with other people, we're a collective. It's an HR business. We're all about sort of trying to find like-minded people to work with. And that can be obviously within our industry, which is advertising, marketing, creative and strategic world. But often partnerships come out of the most weird and wonderful places. I mean, like we partner with quite a lot of VCs at the minute, and help them, admittedly, with their brand and marketing side of things, i.e. the businesses they're investing in, not their own. But, we've met just some amazing, unusual people since we've been working with OPC, and some quite interesting partnership opportunities have come out of that. And some of it is in the service of making money. Some of it's just in the service of having interesting experiences. Some of it's in the service of just helping people out. And I'm all, as I said, particularly on the mental health side of things, I'm always about trying to, wherever time allows, help people with any advice, counsel I can give. And in terms of finding me, our website is orangepanther.co. You'll Google Orange Panther Collective and you'll find my email is on the end of that. Or on LinkedIn, obviously you can kind of find me as Simon Hewitt from Orange Panther Collective. And hopefully our name is so ridiculous that you won't forget it, but we'll see.
Love it. Well, Simon, I really appreciate you sharing experiences with the audience today. I know many of them will have been inspired to reflect actually on their own leadership style, how they might take a different approach to leading both themselves and others, both in their own communities, family, and in the workplace. So thank you. Thanks for your input today.
Well, thank you for having me. And I hope it wasn't too much of a diatribe of the inner thinkings of a madman. But, as I say, I hope it's beneficial to some people, and I'm always here to talk some more if needs be.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed this episode of Confessions of a Successful Leader. You can find out more information about conscious leadership and self-coaching just by typing in Andrew Tallents into LinkedIn or your favorite browser. So until next time, don't forget to stay present, curious, and above all, conscious. Goodbye. I hope you enjoyed this episode of Confessions of a Successful Leader. You can access all previous episodes of the show at confessionsofaSuccessfulLeader.com. If you are interested in finding out more about conscious leadership and self-coaching, just type in Andrew Tallents into LinkedIn or your favorite browser, and you'll find my contact details and all the content that you need. Until next time, don't forget to stay present, curious, and above all, conscious.